Hey guys, my name is James, I'm not a duck, and welcome back to episode 3 of my comprehensive guide to Redstone, where today I'm going to talk about honey blocks and observer blocks and look at how these combine with slime to make flying machines in Minecraft. Last time we talked mostly about pistons and sticky pistons and their basic functionality and their limitations, and slime blocks and how they all interact with the rest of the game. So to do a super quick recap of what was said last time that's important for this video, pistons can push blocks, and sticky pistons can push blocks, and they can also pull blocks. Some blocks like obsidian cannot be pushed, and they also cannot be pulled. Pistons can push up to 12 blocks at once, but if I place in a 13th block, it won't do it. It cannot push more than 12 blocks total. And lastly, slime blocks when pushed or pulled by a piston will drag any adjacent blocks with them. So now for today we have the honey block. In terms of the redstone, it behaves almost exactly the same as slime blocks. Just like slime blocks, it also drags the adjacent blocks with it when it's pushed or pulled by pistons, while a honey block's adjacent blocks cannot be. This is because while the slime block is visually see-through, the game counts it as a solid block, meaning it can transmit a redstone signal through itself. While the honey block is not, it's classified as a transparent block, like glass or a leaf block, so it won't transmit any redstone signal through it. This distinction isn't super important in general, but it does become more important later when it comes to making the flying machines. The neat thing with honey blocks and their interactions with slime blocks is they actually don't interact at all. While they both stick to non-immovable blocks around them, they actually don't stick to each other at all. Meaning you can move long rows of adjacent blocks just by alternating the slime blocks and the honey blocks. In a small case like this, that's not super impressive because you could just use slime or honey by itself. But then when you go to scale that up, of course you encounter the piston push limit of 12 blocks. Because here there is 8 pieces of glass and 12 slime blocks underneath. So here we're a whole 8 blocks over the push limit. Adding in some extra sticky pistons and alternating the slime and honey blocks, however, we can really easily overcome that push limit, meaning that we can make simple and absolutely massive piston doors. Mojang making it so that these two blocks don't stick to each other was huge at the time for making large redstone doors, honestly. And now observers. Observers are fun because they can detect changes in the state of the block directly in front of its face. And then when they do detect a change, they output a very short, maximum signal strength redstone pulse. It can detect a whole range of changes like a lever being flicked, a button being pressed, or a button being unpressed, or even something like a furnace running out of fuel. It can detect a block being placed or broken directly in front of it. Also, an observer will also output a pulse when the observer itself is being moved by a piston, since naturally that counts as the block that it's watching changing state, because the block that it's watching has completely changed from this one to this one. Observers, as I'm sure you can imagine, are incredibly useful in Minecraft, and revolutionized redstone when they were added, even more than honey blocks did. They definitely revolutionized automatic farms. With a setup like this, sugarcane can be automatically farmed because it grows to 3 blocks tall, and we can detect when it reaches that 3rd block using the observer, and break it using a piston to be collected into a chest. Ignoring the fact that I picked one of them up, they would have both fallen into here. Just be aware that having a similar setup like this becomes difficult because every time the piston is extended to break the sugarcane, it activates the observer again. And you end up with this very loud mess of a piston clock, where of course the sugarcane is very rarely going to get a chance to grow, because most of the time this space is taken up by the piston arm. One last thing to mention about observers is their specific application when you use them with sticky pistons. When sticky pistons receive a super short 1-tick redstone pulse, like the one that the observer gives, they actually spit out their block, and it stays there, at least until the second pulse pulls it back in. So this happens because the piston actually takes 1.5 ticks to fully extend. So when the pulse ends too quickly and interrupts it, because of the way that the game is coded, we end up with this behavior of the sticky piston spitting the block out and pulling it back on the second pulse. The exact code-related reasons why this happens aren't super complicated, but I won't cover them here. And this is technically a bug, it's just that it gets left in on purpose because it's such a useful game feature that tons of people use and don't ever want Mojang to remove. And Mojang knows that, and they agree it's useful, so they just purposefully don't remove it. And that's the basics. I believe that's everything important about honey blocks and observers when it comes to their uses within Redstone, other than listing all of the things that observers can and can't detect, as those lists are really quite long. But if you are curious about the specifics there, the lists do exist on the Minecraft wiki pages for the observer blocks. But again, they are very long lists, because there is a lot of stuff that these things can actually detect. And now for the big one, flying machines. Flying machines are contraptions that do just that, they fly, automatically, for as long as you want them to, typically without player intervention, for however long you want it to go for. They are typically built using sticky pistons, observers, and either slime or honey blocks, or both. The basic idea is that you want a setup like this, where first your setup's going to get pushed by this piston, like that, and then you want this same piston to get pulled forward by the rest of the setup, like that, so then we can just continue the cycle on, and the entire setup moves in one direction automatically for as long as needed. And as we said, observers can output a pulse when they are moved themselves. So if I put an observer here, then in theory it should do just that. After this piston moves these, the observer will automatically trigger the sticky piston to pull this piston along with it. Obviously if I just do it like this, then it won't work because the observer tries to power this sticky piston, which can't extend because this extended piston arm is already in its way, which, as we said last time, the game sees as an immovable block. So what we need to do instead is also power this piston very quickly so that the arm is retracted in time for this sticky piston to grab it. So if we place another observer here and trigger it somehow, then it does exactly that. This entire setup has been moved over by a whole block. And if I do that entire thing again with the tick rate really slowed down, then you can see it better in action. Piston extends, sticky piston extends, pulls it along with it. Perfect. So the next step is also pulling along this observer so that it can then activate this piston again and restart the whole process without you needing to do it manually every time, which is exactly what is going to happen here. So obviously to move the observer with the system, we need to use slime blocks or honey blocks. Using this setup with the slime blocks does just that. What we're going to do is we're going to trigger this observer. This observer will power this slime block, which will power this piston, pushing this slime block this way and taking with it this piston and this observer. Once this observer has been moved, it will then power this slime block, which will activate this sticky piston, pulling this slime block with it, and along with it, this observer and this piston. And if I turn down the tick rate again, we can see just that happening. Or if I place it in the correct place, we can see it happening now. Perfect. Just like that. So obviously it only moved once because we have a piece of obsidian here, so it can't actually move any further. If I remove this piston and then update it again, you can see it just goes for as long as it will until it again hits some more obsidian. So this specific flying machine will only go in one direction because this piston here is a regular piston, not a sticky piston. So if I try and power it, it just does that. Because this piston obviously can't pull this setup along with it because it's not sticky. But if I move those two bits back and place a sticky piston instead, then as you can see, it can carry on just fine. Again, until it reaches the obsidian on this side. Just to really drive the point home again, I've turned down the tick speed so you can watch it one go at a time. This observer powers that piston. Whole thing moves across. This observer powers that piston, pulls everything along with it. So obviously this specific setup relies on this observer powering this piston through the slime block. So if I replace these two slime blocks with honey blocks, it doesn't work. Because as we said earlier, the honey blocks are transparent blocks. We cannot power blocks through them. Which means if you're using honey blocks, then you need to power the piston directly with the observer like this. So unfortunately, as far as I'm aware, there isn't actually a way to do this with only two honey blocks like we've done with two slime blocks over there. This setup will obviously work with slime blocks as well, but with honey blocks, that one won't work and you do have to do it this way. And as you can see, it works just fine. And again, back the other way. So when it comes to doing vertical flying machines, wildly, this doesn't work, even though it's just this one flipped vertical. It just doesn't work. If I try, you'll see it just immediately breaks. It doesn't even manage a single block of full transport. If I slow the tick rate all the way down to 1 tick per second, then hopefully we can see it in action, why it breaks. Replace, observer activates the piston, it extends, retracts. That observer activates this piston, pulls it along with it, and for some reason this piston extends too, pulls everything in line like this, and then it just does this. Who knows? I actually don't really know why this happens. Maybe it's quasi-connectivity, which I'll talk about another time, but I'm not entirely sure. If I do find out, I'll mention it at some point. But yeah, vertical pistons are weird. That's all I can really tell you right now. But yeah, regardless, it does not work. There we go. So when doing vertical flying machines, you do need to do it like this. It works for both honey and the slime, where we're powering the piston directly with the observer, like so. Bang! And bam. And of course, works both ways, both of them. And there we have it. Flying machines do of course have a bunch of uses, like transporting you. Obviously if you don't have any way of flying, and you need to get across a large space, either in the sky or over the void in the end. Or a lava lake, for example. Or something like this, where you have a bunch of mobs spawning on this platform, no matter what kind of mobs they are, as long as they take, you know, in this case, full damage, but however you're going to damage them. You can have a flying machine with long slime block arms coming off each side, pushing everything off of the edge. Of course, in this case, I'm just manually making it go backwards and forwards, but you can have it on some kind of timer or some kind of redstone clock, depending on how often you want it to activate and go side to side. Of course, there is still a limit to how wide this can be. Every time this piston tries to push it, it's pushing this line of slime blocks as well as these 2 blocks. And since we can only go up to 12, it means we can only go another 4 blocks this way. And that is the maximum. As well for the other side, another 4 blocks on here. That is the furthest it can go. That will work just fine. But of course, one more slime block on each side, and nothing. So again, always bear in mind your piston push limits. Of course, slime machines do have other uses as well, but I'd say just general transport and knocking mobs off of platforms are probably the most common two uses, at least in my opinion, and in terms of the ways that I use them. Though as opposed to mobs, that does also include breaking blocks, like if you had rows of sugarcane or rows of kelp or bamboo or something that blocks being pushed into them can break them, then that all applies too. But yeah, transport and long slime arms knocking away or off everything in its path. I will also just quickly show you that another way to make a very small horizontal flying machine, rather than having one that's only 1 block tall but 3 wide, you can also have one that's 2 wide, 2 long, and also 2 tall, so that it fits in a nice little cube rather than being 3 long. It doesn't usually matter too much, but in certain situations you may want one that isn't 3 blocks long. So if you have a 2x2 here with slime blocks opposite each other diagonally and slime blocks facing into them, then you can place an observer here pointing towards the piston and another piston here facing towards the other piston. When I say facing towards, of course I mean the output facing towards, not the face. But yeah, then if you just update this piston here, it will go that way. And of course updating this observer will instead make it go the other way. Again, this is just due to a quirk where the observer can power the piston from here, even though there isn't a solid block here, which is referred to as quasi-connectivity, which again, I will talk about at another time, because it's kind of a whole topic by itself really. But that is all for flying machines I'm going to say today. There are a bunch of other stuff you can do with it. You can make ones that go faster somehow, and you can make larger ones that have kind of add-ons and pieces that can go sprawling in all directions if you want a really big flying machine. That is, I believe, usually when you would be using slime blocks and honey blocks in the same flying machine contraption together. And once again, I will wrap up the video by showing you how to craft the new redstone components that we've covered today. The honey block is crafted using 4 honey bottles in a 2x2 square like so, and afterwards you do get the glass bottles back empty. And just to show you how to get honey bottles, if you find either a bee nest or a beehive with a full honey level of 5, again, my redstone texture pack does show that on the top, but you can see it by these various details here being filled with honey. If you just use an empty bottle on them, bam, and bam, there you go, you get honey bottles. Just make sure to place campfires underneath them, otherwise the bees will get angry when you steal their honey from them. Anyway, an observer is crafted like this with 3 pieces of cobblestone at the top, 3 pieces of cobblestone at the bottom, 1 piece of nether quartz and 2 pieces of redstone dust like so. I do always get the nether quartz and the redstone dust the wrong way around when I'm doing this, but it is this way around that you see here. But that is me done for today, guys. I covered everything that I wanted to cover. The next one is probably going to be on comparators and containers, but probably not all of the container related redstone because there is honestly quite a lot of it to cover, but we will at least make a start on it. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do leave a like if you did. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more, and do leave a comment telling me what you thought. So I'll see you next time, guys. Bye.